What if I told you Rome had its own deadly version of the Godfather? Better yet, what if that person was a woman? Her name was Locusta, and she became famous throughout the entire Roman Empire for being an incredible poisoner. In fact, many scholars believe she was the real reason why so many Roman emperors died young. Let me explain. It all began during the rule of Emperor Claudius. His wife, the infamous Empress Agrippina, the younger, was always hungry for more power, and there was only one thing standing between her and total control of the empire: Claudius himself. After Claudius died, Agrippina successfully placed her son, Nero, on the throne, and the two of them began their quest for absolute power. First up, they needed to get rid of anyone who might threaten Nero's reign, and once again, they turned to Locusta. It was a mixture of poisonous herbs and minerals that, when administered correctly, would shut down a person's nervous system and kill them. But this wasn't your average murder. Nero wanted Brutus to suffer, so he told Locusta to mix extra veneno into his wine. When Brutus drank it, the poison burned his throat and made him violently ill. The timing makes sense. After Agrippina was killed, Locusta's influence over Nero grew exponentially. It is possible she had taken something from him that belonged to his mother and used it against her. Either way, Locusta continued her reign of terror throughout Rome. As the hours passed, he convulsed and foamed at the mouth before finally succumbing to the poison. At its peak, her staff included 40 chemists, pharmacists, and poisoners, many of whom were trained by Locusta herself. She even wrote a book explaining the different poisons available to her, how they worked, and how to administer them properly. Most historians agree she was executed, but they can't agree on how. In my opinion, she died the same way she lived, on her own terms. In the chaos of Rome's civil war, she fled the city and hid away in her villa, surrounded by her equipment and thousands of deadly ingredients. Then when the soldiers came for her, she concocted one final poison, one that would end her life before it ended her reign. We may never know what her poison was, but we do know she took her own life, rather than be captured by the enemy. In doing so, she solidified her place in history, and became the first known female serial killer. Some say she was thrown into the Tiber River with a stone tied around her neck. Others claim she was crucified alongside her sons. And still, others argue that she was forced to drink her own poison. But I think there's a better story to be told here. By the end of the empire, it was said that Locusta's poisons had killed over 260 prominent citizens, including 7 rival armies fought across the empire, and ambitious generals seized entire provinces in the name of their favorite emperors. Also, I couldn't have made this video without the help of a website. They have thousands of articles about ancient Rome, including several written by my friend Tom. Anyway, thanks for watching. Stay healthy and happy, and I'll see you next time. Eventually, an obscure governor named Vespasian emerged victorious. He traveled to Rome and crushed the last of Nero's supporters, then established the Flavian dynasty, which would rule Rome for the next 2 centuries. Locusta's work was done. Again, there were no suspicious circumstances surrounding Brutus's death. Just kidding. COVID sucks. But did Locusta's power ever end? On the other hand, Romans revered the goddess of health and medicine, and they associated poison with evil. Unfortunately for Locusta, she was linked to both sides of this equation. According to historian Cassius Dio, the new emperor unleashed a reign of terror against her and her family. Soldiers raided her laboratory, confiscated her equipment, and executed her sons, brothers, and slaves. All the while, Locusta watched helplessly, knowing her fate was sealed. Her poisons kept Rome safe from external threats, but they were also responsible for weakening and destabilizing the empire from within. Well, eventually, yes, but not in the way you might expect. Nero had eliminated a potential rival without drawing any unwanted attention. Well, because this was Rome, and eliminating rivals was supposed to look like an accident, yet she didn't stop. Instead, she grew bolder with each passing day. What kind of power did Locusta hold over the emperor? There are 2 possible explanations. First, it may have been blackmail. Historians believe Locusta may have had compromising information about Nero's mother, Agrippina, and used it to keep him in line. After all, Agrippina had murdered 3 of Nero's siblings to prevent them from taking the throne. It wouldn't be surprising if she also had a list of enemies as long as her arm. If Locusta had proof of some of their misdeeds, she could have threatened to expose them unless Nero gave her permission to continue her killings. Soon, she was killing anyone Nero didn't like, and she did it all with impunity. In fact, some historians argue he was the very first true psychopath to rule an empire. But do unto let, his infamy overshadowed the fact that Nero was still related to some pretty powerful people, including his uncle, the great general and statesman Marcus Junius Brutus. After becoming emperor, Nero decided he wanted to erase any potential threats within his own family and ordered his uncle Essex. Of course, he had to make sure everyone believed it was Brutus's fault. For this task, Nero turned to none other than Locusta. Well, as it turns out, quite easy. You see, Emperor Claudius had a serious health problem. He suffered from epilepsy, which caused him to have seizures and occasionally lose consciousness. Not exactly the action-packed ruler you'd expect from a guy who conquered Britain. To make matters worse, He also had trouble swallowing solid food. This made poisoning him almost impossible, since he would likely notice something in his meal and spit it out. But here's where Locusta got really creative. Instead of putting poison in his food, she simply mixed a sleeping potion into his drink. Once the emperor drank it, he lost consciousness and fell into a deep sleep. From there, Locusta rubbed poison into his gums and left him alone. Without proper medical knowledge at the time, Claudius's doctors assumed he simply had another seizure and died in his sleep. No one suspected foul play until years later when historians uncovered the truth about Locusta and her poison. The ideal assassination was one where the emperor's demise could be blamed on bad wine or a disease. That's why Agrippina went to Locusta, one of Rome's best poisoners, and paid her a lot of money to ensure her husband's death would appear to be a natural one. So she did what any desperate woman would do. She hired a hitwoman. Her target was the emperor, and the job was to kill him permanently. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't she just stab him or shoot him? But how do you kill an emperor without anyone noticing? Still, she wasn't done killing yet. In fact, this was just the beginning. Now, you may know the name Nero. He's become synonymous with insanity and tyranny. She used a very special poison called extremo. These successful hits made Locusta a very rich woman. She bought expensive villas, fine clothing, and jewelry, and became one of the wealthiest poisoners in Rome. But why did Nero let her walk all over him? The second explanation is much darker. Historian Suetonius claimed that Locusta actually poisoned Nero's mother, Agrippina, and took her own life. Historians believe she kept a secret laboratory near the palace where she mixed poisons and created new ways to kill people. You're probably thinking that sounds impressive, but it's nothing compared to today's COVID. Rome had a complicated relationship with poison. On the one hand, it was commonly used to kill enemies. When Nero died in 68 AD, Rome descended into civil war. And guess who Vespasian blamed for his problems? Yep, you guessed it, Locusta. So, how did she die? Strangely, we don't know. We know Locusta was a master poisoner and spent years studying the deadly arts. I'm definitely going to continue exploring the history of poisons. So please leave a comment below with the topic you want to hear about next.